Turning now to the state of Minnesota, where it was a day of accountability for some of the biggest fraudsters there. 15 people were indicted on fraud charges for allegedly stealing $90 million of Medicaid money, funds that were supposed to go to the homeless and the people that have autism. The mastermind behind the Feeding Our Future nutrition assistance fraud scheme got hit with a 41-year prison sentence. And the DOJ released this new video of another leader of that scheme running away from a law enforcement raid after jumping out of a fourth-floor window to escape. He was arrested just a few hours ago. But it's not just fraud in Minnesota. There's sadly plenty of fraud to be found just about anywhere the government is handing out money. In Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy has a great idea to incentivize states to fight fraud. Let them keep a big chunk of the money they stop from getting stolen. Here now with more details is the Republican nominee for governor of Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy. It's a great idea, Vivek, and I can't see any state disagreeing with this unless they want the fraud to continue.
Yeah, look, it's a good point, Lawrence, and I just think this is basic common sense. One of the things I want to set an example for the country through Ohio is prosecute the fraud for the bad guys, recover billions of dollars, and make sure these programs are actually working for the people for whom they were intended rather than the fraudsters. That's not complicated. Now, you can ask why that doesn't happen more often. And one reason is that if a state does bust Medicaid fraud and make this a top priority, as I will in Ohio, the problem is right now a state would only keep 30 or 35 cents on the dollar. So what I laid out was a clear plan to say, look, we have a good relationship with the federal government. We have a federal government that is operating in creative, sensible ways. I want to strike a deal with the feds and to say that, you know what, instead of the state of Ohio keeping 1/3 for the sake of going after fraud, we want to keep at least 2/3 of what we save. That way we have an incentive to say that we're going to make this a top priority. That's what I want to do. That's going to be billions of additional dollars. That's billions with a B in fraud, money that both comes back to Ohio and the federal government saves. And the problem is when you have years of the federal government just giving away money willy-nilly without accountability attached, somebody's got to solve the problem. And I think states can actually be the tip of the spear. I would like to lay out a clear model for how it's done when we hopefully take over leadership of this state in January following the election. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's how you bring down healthcare costs. Okay, it's the easiest way to bring down healthcare costs is prosecute the criminals, recover the money, and then make sure the people who are supposed to be getting that money actually get it.
Let's follow up on that last point that you made, Vivek, because, obviously, as an American that works hard, you're upset about your money being abused and stolen. And in many cases, some of these people didn't even belong in the country or immigrated to the country. So it's a slap in the face. But at its core, there are people that need these programs. The autism that's going on in this country, the poor in our country, they need this. And we're hurting society by not getting control of all of the fraud that's happening in our governments.
Sure. So look, this is a systematic issue. I don't care whether you're on the left or right. You should not want fraudsters using the government money, and it's not really government money. It's your money.
That's right.
It's taxpayer money. To know that you are paying into a system only to see that money diverted not even to a different group of law-abiding citizens, but to precisely the law-breaking citizens or non-citizens, for that matter. So that, I think, is the fundamental problem which we ought to be united to solve. And the fact that that is controversial in certain corridors. I mean, I've taken criticism from some of the left-wing activists in Ohio for pointing out this issue and saying I'm going to make it a top priority. The fact that it is controversial at all reveals the actual problem, which is to say that this isn't about helping the single mother who was supposed to receive temporarily Medicaid payment, or the father of 5 in Toledo who's trying to work 2 jobs to put food on the table, or the disabled veteran, or a college graduate who may not have yet gotten that job and needs temporary assistance. It's not even about that. It is about an overgrown, bloated bureaucracy that almost is in this to preserve itself, and the fraudsters are the ones taking advantage of that. That has to end. And it will end on my watch, certainly with Medicaid fraud in Ohio. We're going to go hard. We're going to go so fast they won't know what hit them. But I believe this should be a broader national example for where states can be at the tip of the spear for a lot of the forms of government programs that also run through the states. You have other government programs that you could look at abuse and go after them in the same way. The other thing I want to mention, Lawrence, is it's not just about the taxpayer money being returned to citizens. That's part of this.
Right.
But part of this is what drives up healthcare costs is when you have fraudsters billing Medicaid, that drives up healthcare costs even for those on Medicare, even those on commercial health insurance plans, even those who are uninsured paying out of pocket. Everybody pays the price. And so this is not a victimless crime. The victims are the actual law-abiding U.S. citizens, consumers of health care that deserve more affordable health care. That's what they're going to get in Ohio under my watch. This shouldn't be a Republican or Democrat issue, but the fact that it has been turned into a partisan issue by some fringe Democrats is a problem that we need to solve, and that's exactly what I'm going to do when I'm leading the state.
Yeah, because, you know, it's partisan because we're learning more that these were voting blocks that they were depending on. And so they kind of looked the other way. And that just can't happen. I don't care what political party you're a part of. If they're doing it on the right, I want to find out who they are, prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Vivek, thanks so much for joining the program.
All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.